We begin in the United States, where tens of thousands of people have joined rallies across the country in support of abortion rights. The marches were galvanized by a restrictive law in the state of Texas that severely limits access to abortions. They also took place 2 days ahead of the start of a new term for the conservative Supreme Court. Protesters fear that the justices could strip federal protections for women seeking safe abortions.
Thousands flocked to Washington in the first Women's March of President Joe Biden's administration. Heading straight to the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court, protesters demanded continued access to abortion. The demonstration took place ahead of the start of a new term for the High Court that will decide the future of abortion rights.
It's beyond important. It's not a young woman issue, it's a person issue. And if anyone does not have equal rights in this country, that means no one has equal rights.
What's going on in Texas has twofold problem. First of all, it's tyranny over women. But the second thing is it's inspiring people to make reports about their neighbors and people they come in contact with.
There should be federal legislation. I'm a citizen of the United States, not a citizen of Texas, not a citizen of Georgia.
The pro-choice rallies held across the U.S. on Saturday were sparked by the so-called Heartbeat Act in Texas. The law severely restricts access to abortion, and anybody involved in helping a woman terminate a pregnancy after 6 weeks can be sued.
Everybody votes. Everybody.
I'm sick and tired of having to fight over abortion rights. It's settled law in the nation, and you are not taking that right away from us. Not now, not ever. And my heart goes out to the places, the women in places like Texas and Georgia and Missouri and so many others.
Counter-protesters also held rallies, but were heavily outnumbered by people demanding full access to abortion. Politicians in Republican-led U.S. states are considering similar measures to those introduced in Texas, which has effectively banned most abortions since early September.
Well, DW correspondent Stephan Simons has been covering that rally for us, which is now wrapping up at the US Supreme Court. Hi, Stephan, good to see you. What's the atmosphere been like on the streets of Washington today?
Well, until just a few minutes ago, it was a little bit raucous because, as you can see here in the background, those are actually pro-life protesters, so anti-abortion protesters. This is some kind of church group there. They're praying a lot for Texas and for the law which bans abortion. So, and of course, the anti-abortion restriction protesters met this group and other groups down the street, and it got a little bit of contentious, some kind of yell fest. However, overall, this was up to 20,000 anti-abortion restriction protesters giving voice their anger or their will to fight the Texas law, the most restrictive abortion law in the country. And of course, they uttered their fear or concern that other states in the United States will pick this up: Alabama, Mississippi, and so on. Some states in the south, east, and in the south. Now they went home. It is dispersed. They only had a license for 3 hours where they could be here, and now everything is cleared. Just those guys here praying for the absence of any abortions ever are still here.
All right, well, tell us about the protests and the campaign against restricting abortion. Can they really make any impact?
I think yes, in terms of motivating, visually motivating the crowd, the people who are really have a problem with the latest law in Texas, with being stripped of basically their right of abortion. So, yeah, this will motivate more and more people, probably, at least that's what the organizers hope, to come out and make their voices heard. Now, how do they make their voices heard? Not by just marching up and down the street, of course. That's nice for visual and for us for television, and for them to show they are there, they are forced. But it's, of course, with their votes and with money, because it is politicians who are pushing laws, restrictive or less restrictive in regards to abortion, through a Senate and to a governor's desk, or let's say even to a president's desk, or here to the Supreme Court right behind me. This is where everybody fears, will this fight end up sooner or later, rather later I guess, but it will end up here in the Supreme Court, now very conservatively stacked by Donald Trump, who appointed 2 conservative judges to the court, will have to decide what happens to Roe versus Wade, or the constitutional right of abortion.
All right, Stephan Simons in Washington, thank you for your reporting.
Now. Hey. Raquel Fatiuques was only 22 when her life changed dramatically 10 years ago.
Somebody kind of just will put something in my drink. They think it was ketamine, which is the horse tranquilizer. And then I ended up in this car. This person kept threatening me over and over because I kept screaming and said, you know, spread your legs, or do you want to die? And he...
A few weeks later, she was raped a second time, this time by her boyfriend. It was 10 weeks into her pregnancy that she made the decision to have an abortion.
So not only like seeing that person's face every day, but how do you explain that to that child, that their father, the reason, you know, they were born is because their father violated their mother.
Raquel lives in Texas, where a law bans most abortions as early as 6 weeks. That's before most women even know they are pregnant. There is no exception for rape or incest. It opens the door for almost any private citizen to sue, not only abortion providers, but also supportive family members and even taxi drivers who give women a ride to the clinic. Brian Hughes is the Republican state senator who wrote the law which will likely start a national trend.
So in a horrible, unspeakable situation like a rape, I hope no one is suggesting that if a woman went through that, if she had an abortion, that would make everything okay. The women we've heard from, some who chose abortion and some who chose to keep the child, have all told us how difficult, what a hard situation that was. So we have a difficult situation already. Let's not make it worse by punishing the child. We don't punish the unborn child, we punish the rapist.
The anti-abortion law is specifically hard for women in Texas just because of the pure size of this state. Driving to a clinic in Arizona, for example, where abortion is still allowed, might take up to 20 hours. That is not only adding extra costs, but making it extremely difficult for women who are without financial or emotional support. We are driving quite far to a secret location in Texas to speak to a doctor who is facing death threats for providing abortion services. To protect his identity, he asked us to only film him from behind.
There's an increased threat to doctors who provide these services. There have been doctors in the past who have been murdered doing these procedures. And with the political climate the way it is right now, there's a lot of tension in the particular trying to provide these services. Procedures were available for women up until 21.6 weeks into their pregnancy. So when you basically narrow it down to 6 weeks, you have excluded probably 80 to 90% of what patients would normally be able to get services in the state of Texas. Sometimes women will try self-induced type abortion. So they will go to any type of extreme to go ahead and to see if they can, quote, abort themselves, and which would happen sometimes. There can be basically, even maternal fatalities. And we have people on the outside who are judging these women and are telling these women what they should do.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
All over Texas, members of evangelical churches are praying that the new law doesn't get overruled. They are applauding the fact that hardly any abortions have been carried out since it was enacted.
I know when there's trauma and a woman experiences something like rape or incest, that there's already one victim, and that the majority of the time, the women that turn around and think that an abortion is going to fix it, it only compounds the problem and makes it worse. So I don't think that there should be an additional victim to try to solve that problem, because you can't undo that, and it's already one trauma.
If the current law had been in place when Raquel was raped 10 years ago, it is very likely that she would not have been able to live the self-determined, happy family life she does today.
All right. Hey, Wiggles.